Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Iran refusing to back down from demands that may soon tank the nuclear talks, and of course Tehran blaming Israel in the process. Meanwhile, Israel joining the world in paying last respects to Her Majesty the late Queen Elizabeth II. And finally, Gadot no longer the only Israeli actress to get the superhero treatment, as Shtisel and Unorthodox star Shira Haas joins the MCU. The stall in JCPOA nuclear talks only getting worse now as Tehran refuses to properly address the IAEA's probes. And of course, according to Iran, it's all Israel's fault. France, Britain, and Germany, collectively known as the E3, now raising serious doubts as to Iran's commitment to a successful outcome in nuclear negotiations. In a joint statement released on Saturday, the European nations saying Iran's position, quote, contradicts legally binding obligations and jeopardizes prospects of restoring the JCPOA, end quote. The UN's International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, holding to resolutions adopted last week, urging Iran to give credible answers regarding its probes into traces of enriched uranium discovered at 3 undisclosed sites. And as party to the International Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran is beholden to pony up such answers. But as a condition of rejoining the JCPOA, Tehran is continuing to insist that the IAEA drop its investigations outright. So given Iran's failure to conclude the deal on the table, the E3 warning that they will consult with international partners on how to best address Iran's nuclear escalations and lack of cooperation regarding its nuclear agreements, especially as Iran is continuing to ramp up its enrichment program with thousands of new centrifuges online and a growing uranium stockpile at over 60% enrichment, a short technical step from the levels needed to create a nuclear bomb and over 30 times the levels necessary for civilian electrical uses. Still, Tehran, meantime, responding to the E3, describing the European rhetoric as unconstructive and regrettable, and accusing the EU countries of, quote, taking a step in the path of the Zionist regime to defeat the negotiations with this ill-considered statement, end quote. Further, Iran implying a threat, adding that, if such an approach continues, Europe must also accept responsibility for the results. Now, as for Israel, analysts say Jerusalem has had little to no influence on the JCPOA, case in point the fact that the talks in Vienna had even occurred. Israel long staunchly opposing the negotiations as being far too weak to properly curb Iran's malign interests and actions in the region, including support for proxy terror groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis in Yemen. After years of efforts, an Israeli-Lebanese maritime border deal may finally soon be signed. The Lebanese foreign minister saying that negotiations are 95% complete and that both governments should strike while the iron is hot. With more is Middle East expert and researcher at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies, Dr. Mordechai Kedar. Dr. Kedar, thank you again so much for being with us. Now, Lebanon's foreign minister argues that with Lebanon's President Aoun finishing his term in October and Israel's elections in November, another chance to reach an accord may not come for some time. Do you agree?
Well, I think that the Israeli side of these negotiations needs silence until November 1st. Because the Prime Minister Lapid knows that if there is any clash with Hezbollah, military clash, this will diminish his chances to win in the elections, in the coming elections, and he will do everything in order to appease Nasrallah and Hezbollah, and Nasrallah knows it very well. And he knows very well how to blackmail Lapid, and I'm afraid that the solution which will be found by the American negotiators, actually the solution which only Nasrallah could benefit from.
Well, but isn't it in both Israel's and Lebanon's best interest to sign a deal as soon as possible, especially with massive gas fields in the area that would definitely go to Lebanon?
No. In any transaction like this, the one who feels pressure, time pressure, is losing. The one who has patience, he is the winner, because he can force his agenda and his interests on the other side. And here, Lapid, I think, is in a hurry because of the elections, in a hurry to come to some kind of agreement, even if this comes on the expense of the Israeli interests. And this is not good, to say the least.
Well, so, okay, going back to Lebanon, is the Lebanese foreign minister correct then that depending on who comes into power next in both countries might tank the deal? Who might replace Aoun or the government in Israel that opposes an agreement?
Well, there is a big difference between Israel and Lebanon. Here, you know nothing about what will happen in this country after November the 2nd. Who will lead the country? Who will direct the foreign policy especially? In Lebanon, it is very clear. Lebanon is dysfunctional. Lebanon is on the verge of bankruptcy. And the one and only organization which still operates in Lebanon in a normal way is Hezbollah. And Nasrallah is actually the ruler of Lebanon. It is now, it will be in a year, 2 years, 3 years. Nobody really sees the recuperation of Lebanon from the occupation of Hezbollah. And don't forget that in my humble view, he will blackmail Israel to the last penny in order to give money to his masters in Iran. After all, he is the long hand or the long tentacle of the Iranian octopus.
Well, what about Hezbollah's popularity? Isn't it waning to a degree because of the economic issues plaguing Lebanon?
On the contrary, right now, Nasrallah is viewed in Lebanon as the only man who, thanks to his Hezbollah, who can take Lebanon out from the economic swamp which it sinks into. Even those who who oppose Hezbollah because either they are not Shia or even within the Shia is not the only man. Now, I think the overwhelming majority of Lebanese depend on Hezbollah, not because they love him or they want him or his agenda, but only because he's the only one who can do something in order to bring some hope to the failing Lebanese economy.
All right, so where does Lebanon lie on some of its claims in the negotiations to begin with? For example, with the Karish gas field that Israel has already set up a gas extraction on. Are they still demanding that it be handed over, or have they at least come down from some of those positions? Because if we're talking about 95% of the deal being done, what does that include?
It includes the fact that apparently Israel succumbed to the demands of Lebanon to mark the border between the maritime border between Israel and Lebanon to the south from the border which Israel originally thought that it should be the border. Means that Israel gives Lebanon large space in the sea in order to give Lebanon the authority or the ownership of gas fields which might be found in that triangle later, or have parts of the Karish gas field, which is, according to the Israeli version, is totally in the Israeli space. But now, if Israel marks the border to the south from that border which Israel originally wanted, it might mean that part of Karish goes to Hezbollah, means to the Iranians.
Where does the United States sit on this?
Well, I think that Biden would buy any agreement which will appease the Hezbollah, just like he wants to appease the Iranians in other negotiations on the nuclear deal. For him, it's the same thing. He doesn't want to deal with the thugs. He wants to appease them.
All right, Dr. Gadot, thank you again so much for your insights.
Thank you.
Now, turning back to politics, the Zionist spirit is broken. Party leaders Ayelet Shaked and Yoaz Hendel ending their short-lived partnership, and largely because Shaked is willing to sit on the right under Benjamin Netanyahu, while Hendel is not. Returning to discuss this and more, political analyst and editor of HistoryCentral.com, Mark Schulman. Mark, good to have you back. Now, can Shaked or Hendel's parties make it into Knesset on their own? Because right now, they're polling very low.
I can't imagine it working for either of them. I mean, Handel was probably one of the best ministers in the government in terms of effectiveness in doing things. But people don't vote on effectiveness in this country.
Hi everyone, it's Emmanuel Kadosh. I wanted to invite you all to subscribe to ILTV Plus, where you can find our daily news and updates about Israel. And not only that, but live feeds, entertainment, our kosher food show, and so much more. Needless to say, your subscription to ILTV Plus helps us grow and create more content while also supporting the state of Israel. Our app is available on all platforms and devices, so I'll see you guys there.